The alien ship called Memory of Tides tumbled through space like a broken toy. Inside, 3,000 Velrani refugees held onto whatever they could find as alarms screamed and lights flickered. Their ship was dying, and they all knew it. Historian Kelvara gripped her seat with trembling hands. Her skin, normally a calm blue color, flashed red and orange with fear. Around her, families huddled together. Children cried. The elderly whispered prayers to gods that seemed very far away. "They're still following us," someone shouted from the navigation station. Through the cracked viewing screen, Kelvara could see them. 6 dark warships, each one belonging to the Kresh Dominion, the same empire that had destroyed their homeworld, the same monsters that had killed millions of her people. The Kresh didn't just conquer worlds. They enjoyed it. The Velrani had never been warriors. They were teachers, artists, farmers, and scientists. Their greatest weapons had been their words and their knowledge. But words couldn't stop plasma cannons. Knowledge couldn't repair a ship that was falling apart. "Navigation systems failing," the pilot announced. His voice shook. "I can't control where we jump." "Then jump anywhere," Kelvara ordered. "Jump now before they fire again." The pilot's hands moved over controls that sparked and smoked. "This could kill us. A blind jump could send us into a star or into solid matter, or we're dead if we stay here." "Jump." The pilot pressed the final command. Reality twisted. The universe screamed. And then everything went white. When the light faded, they were somewhere else. Somewhere the star charts didn't recognize. Somewhere that looked empty. "Where are we?" Kelvara asked. "I don't know," the pilot said. "The system isn't in our database. There's a star and planets. One looks like it might support life, but it's not marked. No one lives here. Can we land? I can crash. That's all I can promise." The ship shook violently. Fires had broken out on 3 decks. The engines were gone. Life support was failing. They had minutes, maybe less. "The 3rd planet," the pilot said. "It has oxygen, water, and wait, I'm detecting radio signals. There is life here. Primitive technology, but definitely intelligent." "Will they help us?" someone asked. No one had an answer. The ship fell toward the blue and green planet like a stone. It burned through the atmosphere, leaving a streak of fire across the morning sky. People on the ground saw it coming. Some thought it was a meteor. Others grabbed their phones and started recording. The Memory of Tides came down in the mountains of Montana, in the United States of America, on planet Earth. It hit hard. The impact created a crater 100 feet deep and sent shockwaves for miles. Trees were flattened. The ground shook like an earthquake. In the nearby town of Clearwater, population 2,400, people ran out of their homes. Car alarms went off. Dogs barked. Everyone looked toward the mountains where a column of smoke rose into the sky. Sheriff Sarah Chen was drinking coffee when the impact happened. The cup fell from her hand and shattered on the floor. She grabbed her radio. "All units, we have some kind of aircraft crash in the northern mountains. I need everyone available to respond. Call the National Guard, call the Air Force, call everyone." She ran to her patrol car, her deputy right behind her. As they drove toward the smoke, her deputy asked the question everyone was thinking. "Sheriff, what if that wasn't an aircraft?" Sarah didn't answer. She just drove faster. The first people to reach the crash site were local farmers. They came on 4-wheelers and pickup trucks, bringing fire extinguishers and first aid kits. What they found made them stop and stare. The ship was huge, maybe 300 feet long. It was made of a metal that seemed to shimmer and change colors. Parts of it were clearly broken, with strange fluids leaking out. And there were sounds coming from inside. Voices, but not human voices. Should we try to help?" one farmer asked. "What if they're dangerous?" Another replied. Then a section of the hull opened. Steam poured out, and through the steam they came. The Velrani were tall and thin, maybe 7 feet on average. Their skin looked like it was made of mother of pearl, shifting through different colors. They had large eyes, long fingers, and they moved gracefully even though many were injured. The first one out saw the humans and froze. Her skin turned pure white with fear. She raised her hands, showing she had no weapons. "Please," she said in a language no one understood. "Please don't hurt us. We have children." The humans couldn't understand her words, but they understood her tone. They understood the way she protected the small figures behind her. They understood fear when they saw it. Old Frank Morrison, who had been farming in Montana for 60 years, stepped forward. He held out his hands, palms up, to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said gently. You're safe here. Let us help. The Velrani woman didn't understand his words either, but she understood his tone. She started to cry, her skin flashing through a dozen colors. More Velrani emerged from the ship, many of them injured, all of them terrified. By the time Sheriff Chen arrived with her deputies and a National Guard unit, the farmers had already started helping. They were bandaging wounds, offering water, and trying to communicate through gestures. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Captain Marcus Webb of the National Guard took one look at the situation and made a decision. Secure the perimeter, but don't point weapons at anyone unless they're aggressive. Get medical supplies up here. Radio for more ambulances. And someone get me a line to the Pentagon because this just became way above my pay grade. Over the next few hours, more help arrived. Military vehicles, news helicopters, scientists, government officials. The crash site became a small city of tents and equipment. Inside one of those tents, historian Kelvara sat with Sheriff Chen and Captain Webb. Between them was a laptop computer. On the screen were words in English. Hello. I am Chorus. I am the ship's artificial intelligence. I have learned your language from your internet. I can translate. Holy, Captain Webb breathed. It learned English in 3 hours? More words appeared. Yes, your language is simple. Your internet contains much information. Also many videos of cats. I do not understand the cats. Despite everything, Sheriff Chen laughed. Yeah, we don't really understand that either.
Can you tell us what happened?
Who are you people? Through Chorus, Kelevara told them everything. She told them about the Velrani homeworld, a peaceful planet where they had lived for thousands of years. She told them about the Kresh Dominion, an empire that conquered planets for sport and resources. She told them how the Kresh had invaded 3 years ago, how most of the Velrani had died fighting a war they never wanted. We are all that remains, Kelvera said, her words translated by Chorus. 3,000 survivors. We fled in this ship, but they followed us. We jumped blindly to escape. We never meant to come here. We didn't even know your world existed. How badly is your ship damaged? Webb asked. It will never fly again. We have the technology to repair it, but not the resources. It would take months of work, and we don't have months. We barely have days. Why not? Kelevara's skin turned dark gray, the color of despair. Because we didn't escape. Not really. The Kresh attached a tracking beacon to our hull before we jumped. It was dormant, probably damaged in the fighting, but Chorus detected it activating an hour ago. They know where we are. How long? Sheriff Chen asked. 14 of your days. Maybe less. Captain Webb stood up and walked to the tent entrance. He looked out at the Velrani refugees sitting in small groups, sharing food with the human volunteers. He saw Velrani children playing with human children, the language barrier meaning nothing to kids who just wanted to play. He saw his soldiers helping elderly Velrani who could barely walk. And what will these Kresh do when they get here? He asked without turning around. They will kill us, Kelvara said simply. All of us. They will make it slow in public to scare other worlds from resisting. And your people, I am sorry. You should not be involved. If you have ships, if you can leave this world, you should go. The Kresh will not care that you tried to help us. They will see only primitives who harbored their escaped slaves. Primitives. Webb turned around. Lady, we've split the atom, sent people to our moon, and created the internet that your AI learned from. We're not that primitive. You have no faster-than-light travel, no energy weapons, no shields. By galactic standards, Kelevara stopped, seeing the look on his face. I meant no insult. But you must understand, the Kresh have conquered 40 worlds. They have plasma weapons that can melt your tanks. They have shields that stop bullets. They have warships that can destroy cities from orbit. You cannot fight them. Sheriff Chen looked at Captain Webb. Webb looked back at her. Something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. Maybe we can't, Chen said. But we're not going to just hand you over to them either. You would risk your world for strangers? You're not strangers anymore, Chen said. You crashed here, which makes you Clearwater's problem. And in Clearwater, we take care of our problems. We take care of our people. We are not your people. Chen smiled. You are now. Over the next 2 days, the situation spiraled in a dozen directions. The United Nations held emergency meetings. World leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted to give the Velrani to the Kresh to avoid war. Others wanted to study the alien technology. Still others wanted to help but didn't know how. While politicians argued, the people of Clearwater made their own decision. They set up camps for the Velrani. They shared their food, their medicine, their homes. The local school opened its gym as a shelter. Churches brought blankets and clothes. The hospital worked around the clock, treating Velrani injuries with help from Velrani doctors who had advanced medical knowledge. Communication got easier. Chorus created translation devices small enough to wear as earpieces. Soon humans and Velrani could talk to each other directly. Friendships formed. The Velrani engineer named Sil Tran started working with Emma Reeves, a local mechanic and computer expert. They bonded over trying to fix a broken Velrani medical device. "Your technology is so different," Emma said, looking at the device's insides. "But the basic principles are the same. Energy still needs circuits. Data still needs processing. We can work with this." "You learn quickly," Sil Tran said, his skin turning a warm orange color that Emma was learning meant approval. "Most species need years to understand Velrani engineering. You understand it in days. We're good at adapting. It's kind of our thing." On the fourth day after the crash, Captain Webb called a meeting. He gathered Sheriff Chen, the town council, military advisors, and historian Kelevara. "I've been on calls with the Pentagon and the United Nations for 2 days straight," Webb said. "Here's what we know. The crash are coming. We have maybe 10 days left. The president wants options. The UN wants options. Everyone wants options. So far, the best option anyone's come up with is to evacuate the area and hope the crash just take the Velrani and leave." "That's not an option," Sheriff Chen said flatly. "I agree. So I'm asking you, all of you, what do we do?" Old Frank Morrison, who had been invited because he was the first to help the Velrani, spoke up. "My grandfather fought in World War II, Normandy Beach. He told me once that the moment that mattered wasn't when he got the call to serve. It was before that. It was when he decided deep down what kind of man he wanted to be, what he was willing to stand for." "What's your point, Frank?" the mayor asked. "My point is we've already decided. We decided the moment we started helping. Now we just need to figure out how." Webb nodded. "Then we'd better get creative. Kelvara, tell us everything you know about the Kresh, how they fight, how they think. Everything." As Kelvara spoke, Emma Reeves listened from the back of the room. Her mind was already racing. Humans couldn't match Kresh technology. Not yet, but maybe they didn't need to. Maybe they just needed to be smart, to be creative, to be human. She pulled out her phone and started taking notes. Next to her, Sil Tran did the same on a Velrani datapad. They exchanged a look. "I have an idea," Emma whispered. "So do I," Sil Tran replied. Outside the meeting room, life in Clearwater continued. Velrani and humans worked side by side. Children played together. The barriers of language and culture were falling fast, replaced by something simple and powerful: shared humanity. Or maybe shared decency was a better word, since not everyone involved was human. But in the mountains above the town, where the crashed ship still smoldered, Chorus detected something. A signal from deep space. A message in Kresh military code. The Hunter fleet had found them. The countdown had begun. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council was loud and chaotic. Diplomats from every major nation spoke at once, their voices echoing through the chamber. On the screens behind them, live footage showed the crash site in Montana, where humans and Velrani worked together under military guard. The Chinese ambassador stood first. "We must consider our priorities. These aliens brought danger to our world. We have a duty to protect Earth, not refugees from someone else's war." "They didn't choose to come here," the British ambassador argued. "They were fleeing genocide. We have international laws about refugees." "International laws that don't cover aliens," someone shouted back. The Russian ambassador leaned forward. "Perhaps we can negotiate with these Kresh. Give them what they want in exchange for peace." "You mean surrender the Velrani?" The Brazilian representative looked horrified. "We would be sending 3,000 people to their deaths. Better than risking 8 billion human lives." President Maria Alvarez of the United States listened to the arguments for 2 hours. Finally, she stood up. The room quieted. "I've received reports from our military advisors," she said. "They tell me we can't win a fight against the Kresh, not with our current technology. The Kresh have weapons we can barely imagine. But those same advisors also tell me something else. They tell me that the people of Clearwater, Montana have already made their choice. They're not asking for permission, they're asking for support. One town can't decide policy for the entire planet, the French ambassador said. No, but they can remind us what policy should be, Alvarez replied. We've spent decades building international laws about human rights, about protecting refugees, about standing up to tyranny. Now we have our first chance to apply those laws beyond our species. What do we choose? The vote, when it came, was close. But it passed. The United Nations would not surrender the Velrani. They would not evacuate Clearwater. Instead, they would prepare. For what exactly, no one was quite sure. But they would prepare. Back in Clearwater, the news was met with mixed reactions. Some people were relieved. Others were terrified. Sheriff Chen stood in the town square and addressed the crowd that had gathered. I won't lie to you, she said. This is going to be dangerous. The military's working on plans, but we all know the truth. We're facing something we've never faced before. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked myself. Do we stand and fight, or do we run? We stand, someone called out. Are you sure? Because if you want to evacuate, no one will blame you. This isn't your fight. Old Frank Morrison pushed his way to the front of the crowd. Sheriff, with respect, you're wrong. This became our fight the moment we decided to help. My grandfather didn't run from bullies, and neither will I. One by one, other people spoke up. Veterans who had served in wars, parents who wanted to teach their children to stand for what was right, teachers, mechanics, shopkeepers, and farmers, even some teenagers, despite their parents' protests. Then we have work to do, Chen said. Captain Webb has requested volunteers. We need to prepare this town. We need to help the Velrani repair what they can, and we need to learn as much as possible about what's coming. The work began immediately. Military engineers arrived with equipment and supplies. They started building defensive positions around the town. Trenches were dug. Barriers were set up. The National Guard brought in tanks, artillery, and missile systems. It wasn't much compared to alien technology, but it was what they had. In a makeshift laboratory set up in the high school, Emma Reeves and Siltran worked 18-hour days. They had pulled apart several pieces of Velrani technology, trying to understand how it worked. Around them, other engineers and scientists, from around the world, studied holographic displays and strange devices. Okay, explain this to me again, Emma said, looking at a Velrani shield generator. How does it stop energy but not matter? It creates a field that disperses coherent energy, Siltran explained. Laser, plasma, radiation, all of these are scattered. But solid matter has too much mass, it passes through, though slowly. So bullets would work? Theoretically, yes, but Kresh armor is very strong. Your bullets might not penetrate. Emma grinned. You've never seen a .50 caliber round, have you? Through Chorus, humanity learned everything the Velrani knew about the Kresh Dominion. It painted a terrifying picture. The Kresh were a warrior species standing over 8 feet tall with natural armor plating. They loved conquest and saw it as a form of art. They had conquered 40 star systems and enslaved dozens of species. Their technology was several generations ahead of Earth's. Plasma weapons that could melt through tank armor. Personal shields that stopped most attacks. Warships that could move faster than light and strike from orbit. Worst of all, they were experienced. The Kresh had fought hundreds of battles. They knew what they were doing. We've never won against them in open combat, Kelvara explained to a room full of generals and admirals. Our only victories came from hiding, from running. Direct engagement always ends in defeat. General Patricia Okonkwo of the Joint Chiefs studied the data with a frown. She was a veteran of 3 wars and had commanded troops in a dozen conflicts. She knew how to read battlefield reports. They're good, she admitted. But they're not perfect. Look at this. She pointed to a report from a battle on a Velrani colony world. They rely heavily on their shields and superior firepower. Their tactics are straightforward, overwhelming force applied directly. They don't use stealth, they don't use ambush. They just attack head-on because they've never needed to do anything else. That's because no one has ever been able to stop them, Kelvara said. No one's ever tried to fight them on a planet like Earth, Okonkwo replied. Look at your homeworld. Low gravity, thin atmosphere, calm weather. Most habitable planets are like that, aren't they? Yes. Planets with conditions like yours are very rare. We call them heavy worlds or storm worlds. They're difficult to colonize. Captain Webb leaned forward. General, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that these Kresh have never fought on a planet where the weather can kill you, where the gravity makes you tired, where the air is so thick and wet it feels like drowning. They've never fought in our mountains, our jungles, our cities. They've never fought on a world full of predators, diseases, and a species that evolved to survive all of it. You want to bring them down here? An admiral asked. That's insane. Is it? In space, they have every advantage. But on Earth? On our terms? Maybe we have a chance. A small chance, Kelevara said, and it would require them to come down instead of simply bombarding you from orbit. That's where you come in, Okonkwo said. You said they want to make an example of you. Public executions. They want to capture you alive, don't they? Yes, but Kelevara's skin turned pale. You want to use us as bait. I want to give them a reason to come down here instead of just destroying us from space. If they think they can grab you easily, they'll land troops, and once they're down here, we can fight. The room fell silent. It was a brutal plan. It put the Velrani in direct danger, but it was also the only plan that had any chance of working. Will your people accept this? Okonkwo asked Kelevara. The Velrani historian looked at her hands. Her skin cycled through several colors: fear, sadness, determination. We fled our homeworld because we were not fighters. We left behind those who were willing to die. We chose survival over courage. But perhaps, she looked up, perhaps we have run far enough. If you are willing to stand for us, how can we do less? We'll keep you safe, Webb promised. That's the whole point of this. No one is safe in war, Captain, but perhaps we can be brave. The next few days were a blur of activity. Volunteers from around the world arrived in Montana, military units from allied nations, engineers and scientists, medical personnel, even civilians who wanted to help in any way they could. The population of Clearwater swelled from 2,000 to nearly 20,000. The Velrani contributed everything they could. They couldn't fight. Their culture had no tradition of warfare, but they could teach. Velrani doctors showed human medics how to treat injuries with advanced techniques. Velrani engineers explained how their technology worked. A Velrani named Tokmar, who had been a teacher back home, started classes on Kresh psychology and culture. The Kresh respect strength, Tokmar explained to a group of soldiers. They see compassion as weakness. They believe might makes right. This makes them confident but also predictable. They will always choose the most direct, most violent solution. So they're bullies, a Marine sergeant said. Yes, very powerful, very experienced bullies. Emma and Siltran made a breakthrough on the 5th day. They had been trying to understand how Velrani computers processed information. The technology was completely different from human computers, but Emma noticed something interesting. Your systems process data sequentially, right? One calculation at a time, but incredibly fast. Yes, Siltran confirmed. Ours work differently. We use parallel processing, many slower calculations happening at the same time. What if we combine them? Use your speed with our architecture? They spent 2 days testing the theory. When it worked, they called Captain Webb immediately. We can interface our systems, Emma explained excitedly. We can connect human computers to Velrani technology. That means we can control their devices, modify them, reprogram them. Why does that matter? Webb asked. Siltran's skin flashed bright yellow with excitement. Because the Kresh use similar technology to ours. If we can hack Velrani systems, we might be able to hack Kresh systems too. Webb smiled slowly. How long would it take to create a virus or something similar? We don't know, but we can try. While engineers worked on technology, others worked on more basic preparations. The town of Clearwater was transformed into a fortress. Every building was reinforced. Evacuation tunnels were dug underground. Supply caches were hidden throughout the area. The surrounding forests were mapped in detail. Local hunters proved especially valuable. They knew every trail, every ridge, every hiding spot in the mountains. They taught soldiers how to move quietly through the forest, how to read the terrain, how to use natural cover. The creche will have better sensors than us, one hunter explained. But sensors can be fooled. Deer do it all the time when they freeze. We can teach you to move like the forest animals. Velrani children adapted surprisingly quickly to Earth. They played with human children, learning games and sharing their own. Language barriers faded fast. Children always learned faster than adults. Teachers set up schools that mixed human and Velrani students. It was chaos, but it was hopeful chaos. One evening, Sheriff Chen found Kelvara sitting alone watching the sunset. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Chen said, sitting down beside her. "Yes, our sun was yellow like yours, but smaller. The sunsets were pale. This..." Kelvara's skin shifted to match the orange and purple of the sky. "This is magnificent. What are you thinking about?" "I am thinking that we may all die in a few days. And I am thinking that even if we do, we have been given a gift. Your people barely know us, yet you are willing to die for us. I have lived for 70 of your years. I have studied thousands of civilizations through their histories. And I have never encountered anything like humanity." "We're not that special," Chen said with a smile. "You are, though. Most species, when faced with a threat like the creche, would negotiate or flee. Only a few would fight, but none would fight for strangers. None would risk everything for people they just met. You are either the bravest species in the galaxy or the craziest. Maybe both." Kelvara laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Yes, maybe both." On the 8th day, Chorus detected the creche fleet entering the solar system. 6 warships, just as expected. They were moving quickly toward Earth. Communications came almost immediately. A face appeared on every screen that Chorus could access. Televisions, computers, phones. It was a creche face, angular and armored, with eyes that looked almost reptilian. When it spoke, Chorus translated. "Primitive species of the 3rd planet. I am Warlord Thexcor of the Creche Dominion. You harbor criminals who belong to us. Surrender them within 6 of your hours and you will be spared. Refuse and your world will burn. You have no chance against us. Accept your place in the natural order." The transmission ended. President Alvarez consulted with her advisors for less than an hour. Then she recorded her response. Chorus broadcasted on every frequency the creche would be monitoring. "Warlord Thexcor, I am President Maria Alvarez of the United States of Earth." She was stretching the truth there. Earth didn't have a unified government, but it sounded better. "The people you call criminals are refugees seeking asylum. We do not surrender refugees. We do not bow to threats. If you want them, you'll have to come and take them. Good luck with that." Around the world, billions of people watched. Some cheered. Others prayed. Many just waited to see what would happen. In Clearwater, Captain Webb gathered his officers. "This is it. They'll probably take a day or two to study us and plan their attack. Let's use that time. Final checks on everything. Make sure civilians are in shelters. Get everyone fed and rested while we can." "Do you think we can win?" a young lieutenant asked. Webb looked out at the town, where human and Velrani soldiers stood together on the walls they'd built. "I think we're about to teach the galaxy why you don't threaten someone's home. Win or lose, they'll remember Earth." In orbit, Warlord Thexcor studied the primitive planet below. His officers assured him the natives had no chance. No shields, no energy weapons, no space fleet. It would be a simple operation. But something bothered him. Their response had been too confident, too defiant. Primitives should be terrified. They should be begging. "Scan the area where the Velrani crashed," he ordered. "Tell me what you see." Military buildup, Warlord, significant, thousands of troops. Heavy weapons for their technology level. They plan to fight. Thexcor laughed. "Excellent. It has been too long since we had proper sport. Prepare the assault teams. We will take the Velrani and teach these humans the price of defiance." His officers cheered. None of them thought to ask why a primitive species would be so willing to fight a force they couldn't possibly defeat. The countdown to invasion had begun. The creche dropships entered Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. 40 transport craft, each carrying 50 soldiers in powered armor. 2,000 elite creche warriors, ready to crush a primitive resistance and capture their escaped prey. It should have been simple. Warlord Thexcor watched from his flagship as his forces descended. His officers provided constant updates. Everything was going according to plan. The humans had gathered around the crash site exactly as expected. They had brought their primitive weapons, chemical propellant firearms, explosive missiles, metal vehicles. Toys compared to Kresh technology. "Warlord, we're detecting aircraft approaching," an officer reported. "How many?" 40. "No, 60. They keep coming, Warlord. At least 200 enemy aircraft converging on our dropships." Thexcor frowned. "What kind of aircraft?" "Atmospheric fighters. No energy weapons detected. Carrying primitive explosive missiles. Have our escorts engage them." The Kresh fighter craft broke formation and moved to intercept. They were faster, more maneuverable, and their plasma cannons could vaporize the human planes with a single hit. In space, it would have been a massacre. But they weren't in space. They were in Earth's atmosphere at 14,000 feet over the Rocky Mountains. The human pilots knew these skies. They knew how to use the mountains, how to fly so low their wings almost touched the trees. They came in from the sun, from behind ridges, from unexpected angles. They fired their missiles from miles away and then dove for cover. The Kresh fighters were better machines, but there were only 20 of them and there were 200 human aircraft. F-22s, F-35s, F-16s, even some older jets pulled out of storage. The humans fought like wolves attacking a bear, hit and run, never staying still long enough to be caught. "Status," Thexcor demanded. "We're losing escorts, Warlord. 7 destroyed, 5 damaged. The dropships are taking hits too. These primitive missiles, they're damaging our armor." "How is that possible?" "The explosives are crude but powerful, Warlord. And there are so many of them." Thexcor's fist hit his command console. "All dropships increase speed and land immediately. Get our troops on the ground where they can fight properly." The dropships accelerated, but the damage was done. 16 of the 40 transports had been destroyed or damaged badly enough that they had to turn back. The Kresh ground force had been reduced by 40% before a single soldier touched Earth. The remaining transports came down hard in the mountains around Clearwater. Loading ramps dropped and Kresh shock troops charged out in their powered armor. Each soldier stood over 8 feet tall, covered in armor plating that could stop most conventional weapons. They carried plasma rifles that could melt through steel, and immediately they felt wrong. "Commander, we're experiencing difficulties," a squad leader reported. "What kind of difficulties?" "The gravity. It's oppressive. My suit compensates, but movement is sluggish. And the air. Sensors show adequate oxygen, but breathing is difficult." "You're at high altitude," their commander replied. "The locals are adapted to it." "You will adapt. Now move." The Kresh forces began their advance on Clearwater, following valleys and ridges toward their objective. They expected to reach the town within hours. They expected the humans to break and run as soon as they saw real combat. They were wrong on both counts. The first ambush came in a narrow valley. The Kresh squad was moving in standard formation when the hillside above them exploded. Not from energy weapons or advanced technology, from simple explosives buried in the dirt and detonated by wire. The blast knocked 3 soldiers down the hillside. Before the others could react, gunfire erupted from the trees. Large caliber rounds, 50 BMG and bigger, slammed into Kresh armor. The shields flickered and held, but the kinetic impact staggered the soldiers. "Return fire," the squad leader ordered. Plasma bolts lit up the forest. Trees exploded into flame where the shots hit. But the humans were already gone, falling back through paths they'd prepared in advance. The Kresh pursued, confident in their superiority. They ran straight into the second ambush. This time it was claymore mines and a hail of machine gun fire from 3 directions. 2 more Kresh went down, their shields overloaded. The rest took cover, something they rarely had to do. "These humans are not behaving like primitives," the squad leader reported. "They're using coordinated ambush tactics. They know the terrain." "Of course they do," Captain Webb said, watching from a command post 2 miles away. He was monitoring radio chatter and drone footage. "This is our home. Now fall back to position Delta and let the artillery have them." The human soldiers retreated through the forest in good order, following routes marked with GPS. Behind them, the Kresh squad advanced cautiously. They'd learned to be careful. These humans had teeth. Then the artillery started. The Kresh had shields designed to stop energy weapons. They worked less well against high explosive shells falling from the sky. The bombardment was constant, 155mm howitzers firing from positions miles away. The Kresh scrambled for cover, their formation breaking apart. This was just one squad. Across the entire battle zone, the same scene repeated dozens of times. The Kresh expected a conventional battle. They got guerrilla warfare from soldiers who had learned hard lessons in Afghanistan Iraq, and a dozen other conflicts. In his flagship, Thek's Corps watched casualty reports climb. 10%, 12%, 15%. This was impossible. They were fighting primitives. Send reinforcements. Commit another 1,000 troops. Warlord, we only brought 3,000 total. If we commit more, do it. And tell them to secure the Velrani position at all costs. The second wave of dropships launched. This time the human air force was ready. They'd been holding back reserves for exactly this moment. The aerial battle resumed, fiercer than before. On the ground, the Kresh finally reached the outskirts of Clearwater. They'd taken hours to cover a distance that should have taken minutes. They'd lost hundreds of soldiers to ambushes, artillery, and the terrain itself. One entire unit had gotten lost in the forest and been cut off and destroyed. But now they could see their objective. The crashed Velrani ship in its crater, surrounded by defensive positions. Human soldiers dug into bunkers and trenches, and somewhere in there 3,000 Velrani refugees. All units. Begin final assault, the Kresh commander ordered. That's when the weather changed. One of the mountain's afternoon thunderstorms rolled in. It happened most days at this elevation, which was why the locals hadn't thought to mention it. In minutes, the sky went from blue to black. Lightning split the air. Rain fell in sheets so thick you could barely see 10 feet. For humans, it was just weather. Unpleasant but normal. For the Kresh, it was a nightmare. Their shields, designed to stop energy, went haywire in the electrical storm. Lightning bolts struck their armor, not enough to kill but enough to disable systems. Their thermal sensors couldn't see through the rain. Their communications were filled with static. "What is this?" a Kresh soldier shouted. "Is this some kind of weapon?" "It's just a storm," his commander replied. "Push through." But pushing through a Montana thunderstorm while wearing powered armor, already exhausted from the high gravity and thin air, being shot at by humans who grew up in this weather, that was harder than it sounded. The humans attacked under cover of the storm. They wore simple rain gear and night vision goggles. They knew exactly where they were because they'd lived here their whole lives. The Kresh were lost, half-blind, and terrified of an enemy they could barely see. Sheriff Chen led one of the counterattacks personally. She'd grown up in these mountains, hunted in these forests. The rain didn't slow her down at all. Her team moved through the storm like ghosts, striking at confused Kresh units and disappearing again. "This isn't battle," one Kresh officer reported. "It's chaos. These humans fight without honor, without formation. They're like animals. They're predators," historian Kilvera said quietly. She was watching from a bunker with Captain Webb. "Look at them. Look at how they move. We evolved on a gentle world. The Kresh evolved on a harsh one. But humans evolved on a world that actively tried to kill them. They're survivors." Webb nodded. "Every species on Earth is either a predator or prey. Humans, we're both. We got hunted by bigger, stronger things for millions of years. So we got smart. We got mean. And we learned that the best way to survive is to work together." The storm lasted for 3 hours. By the time it passed, the Kresh assault had completely stalled. They'd taken 40% casualties and hadn't even breached the outer defensive lines. Soldiers who had conquered 40 worlds, who had never known defeat, were pinned down and demoralized. Warlord Thek's Corps couldn't believe what he was seeing. How? How are primitives doing this?" "Warlord," his tactical officer said carefully, "I've been analyzing their tactics. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They don't value honor or glory. They value winning. They use every advantage, terrain, weather, knowledge of their home. And they work together perfectly. Every human unit supports every other unit. We work together too. We work in formation, Warlord. We follow doctrine. They adapt. Every time we counter one tactic, they switch to another. They're learning as they fight." Thek's Corps stood at his viewing screen watching the battle below. He'd expected to collect his escaped slaves and teach some primitives a lesson. Instead, he was losing. "Pull back all ground forces to defensible positions, rest them. We'll bombard the target from orbit and then send in fresh troops." "Warlord, if we bombard, we might kill the Velrani." "I don't care anymore. I want this planet punished for its defiance." But even that wasn't simple. As the Kresh fleet moved into bombardment position, alarms went off. "Multiple launches detected from the planet's surface." Identifying missiles, hundreds of them. "Primitive missiles can't hurt us in space." "Warlord, they're not using explosive warheads. They're kinetic penetrators, solid metal projectiles." The Kresh shields were designed to disperse energy. Solid matter was a different problem. The missiles weren't sophisticated, basically modified ICBMs carrying tungsten rods. But there were so many of them and they were moving so fast. 3 missiles hit Thexcor's flagship. The shields absorbed most of the impact, but damage alarms blared. More missiles targeted the other ships. The Kresh fleet was forced to maneuver, breaking their bombardment formation.
This is madness.
Thexcor roared. These primitives should be cowering.
They should be begging.
Why do they fight? On the ground, Emma Reeves was asking herself a similar question. She was exhausted, scared and covered in mud from diving into a trench when a plasma bolt flew overhead. Siltran was next to her, his skin cycling through colors of fear.
Why are you doing this?
Siltran asked. You barely know us. We're not even the same species. Why risk your lives? Emma thought about it. She thought about the Velrani children she'd seen playing with human kids. She thought about old Frank Morrison, who'd treated a scared alien refugee with the same kindness he'd show any lost stranger. She thought about her country's history, imperfect, full of mistakes, but built on the idea that everyone deserved a chance. Because someone has to, she finally said. Because if we don't stand up to bullies, who will? Because, hell, I don't know, because it's the right thing to do. That's not a logical reason. Since when are humans logical? Emma grinned. We're the species that went to the moon just to prove we could. That invented the internet so we could share pictures of cats. That will fight to the death to protect complete strangers. We're crazy. But we're your kind of crazy now. Above them, the battle continued. The Kresh were stronger, better armed, more experienced. But they were fighting on Earth on humanity's terms. And humans had one more advantage the Kresh had never encountered before. Humans were stubborn. Ridiculously, stupidly, gloriously stubborn. They didn't know when to quit. They didn't know when they were beaten. They just kept fighting, kept adapting, kept learning, and slowly, incredibly, impossibly, they were winning. Night fell on the battlefield. The Kresh controlled less ground than when they'd started. Their forces were scattered and demoralized. The humans were tired too, but they were on their home ground with short supply lines and unlimited reinforcements. More soldiers arrived every hour from around the world. In his command post, Captain Webb allowed himself a small smile. They brought a space army to a ground war. Bad move. Can we actually win this? A lieutenant asked. I don't know, Webb admitted. But we're sure as hell not losing. And sometimes that's enough. Day 2 of the battle dawned cold and clear. The morning sun revealed a landscape transformed by war. Burned trees, cratered earth, and the wreckage of Kresh equipment scattered across the mountains. But also, surprisingly, Kresh soldiers still fighting. Warlord Thexcor had spent the night in emergency meetings with his officers. The casualty reports were devastating. Nearly 800 dead, 300 wounded. For an empire that rarely lost more than 50 soldiers in an entire planetary conquest, it was catastrophic. We cannot continue this way, one officer said. We should withdraw, regroup, return with more forces. Withdraw? Thexcor's voice was dangerous. Admit defeat to primitives? The Empire would never forgive such shame. We would all be executed. Then what do we do, Warlord? Thexcor studied the tactical maps. The humans had turned Clearwater into a fortress. Every approach was covered by fire. The terrain favored defense. A direct assault would cost hundreds more soldiers. We use everything, he decided. Deploy the combat drones. The war mechs. Every weapon we have. Overwhelm them with sheer numbers and firepower. Even primitives must break eventually. The combat drones launched at dawn. Hundreds of small flying machines, each armed with plasma weapons and explosive charges. They swarmed toward Clearwater like angry insects. The humans were ready. They'd been tracking the Kresh deployment all night with satellites and drones. When the swarm came, they met it with anti-aircraft fire. Thousands of rounds filled the sky. The drones were fast and maneuverable, but there were only so many of them. Half were destroyed before reaching the defensive lines. The survivors dove toward human positions, firing and bombing. Soldiers scattered for cover. Several bunkers took direct hits. But the humans had prepared for this too. They'd set up decoy positions, empty trenches and fake equipment, and many drones wasted their ammunition attacking nothing. They're learning too fast, a Kresh tactical officer muttered. Every trick we use, they counter within hours. Then the war mechs arrived. These were the Kresh's heavy assault units. 12-foot-tall armored machines with enough firepower to destroy a building. 6 of them strode toward Clearwater, their shields glowing, plasma cannons charging. They were impressive. They were terrifying. They made the ground shake with each step, and then they stepped on the mines. The humans had spent 2 days planting explosives everywhere. Not sophisticated mines with fancy sensors, just simple bombs buried in the ground, detonated by pressure or remote control. The kind of thing humans had been using in wars for over a century. 3 mechs went down in the first minute, their legs blown off. The others slowed down, scanning for more threats. That's when the artillery found them. High explosive shells rained down, overwhelming their shields through sheer volume of fire. The last mech made it within 100 yards of the defensive line before a soldier named Rodriguez, who'd carried a Javelin anti-tank missile 3 miles up a mountain, fired at point-blank range. The missile hit the mech's cockpit. The shield flickered and died. The explosion tore the machine apart. Rodriguez shouldered his now empty launcher. "Biggest deer I ever shot." His squad laughed nervously. They were exhausted, scared, and running low on ammunition. But they were still fighting. In a bunker underneath the town, Emma and Siltran hadn't slept in 36 hours. They were close to a breakthrough on their computer virus, but close wasn't good enough. "The crash systems have too many safeguards," Emma said, rubbing her eyes. "Every time we crack one layer, there's another underneath." "We need more processing power," Siltran replied. "But the ship's main computer is damaged beyond repair." "What if we don't use the ship's computer?" Emma had an idea forming. "What if we use Earth's computers?" "All of them?" "I don't understand." "Our internet connects millions of computers worldwide. What if we created a distributed processing network? Use thousands of computers working together to crack the crash encryption?" Siltran's skin flashed bright yellow. "That could work, but we'd need to coordinate all those systems. The programming alone would take weeks. Unless," Emma pulled up her phone, "unless we ask for help." An hour later, Emma had posted a message on every hacker forum, programmer community, and tech website she could find. She explained what they needed: a virus to disable crash combat systems. She provided the basic code structure and the encryption they needed to crack. "You just told the entire internet about alien technology?" Captain Webb asked when he found out. "Yeah, and in 2 hours we've gotten responses from 14 countries. Programmers are working on it right now. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. That's crazy, stupid, brilliant. All of the above," Webb admitted. "But if it works," it worked. By midnight, they had a functioning virus. It wasn't elegant. It was a mess of human and Velrani code held together with digital duct tape. But when they tested it on a captured crash drone, the machine systems crashed within seconds. "Upload it," Emma ordered. "Every crash device we can reach." Cora sent the virus through the air on every frequency the crash used. It spread like a digital plague, jumping from one crash device to another. Shields flickered and failed. Weapons stopped firing. Combat drones fell from the sky. Communication systems went silent. In his flagship, alarms blared as systems began failing. "What's happening?" Thexcor demanded. "Unknown attack, Warlord. Some kind of electronic warfare. Our systems are crashing. The primitives are inside our network." "How? They don't have the technology." "They do now, Warlord. The virus didn't destroy everything. The crash had backups and manual overrides. But it bought the humans precious time. Without shields and communication, the crash ground forces were vulnerable. Captain Webb ordered the counterattack immediately. All units advance. Hit them while they're blind." The humans came out of their defensive positions like wolves that had been waiting for the right moment. They'd been on defense for 2 days, taking losses, being pushed back. Now they pushed forward. The crash, suddenly fighting without their technological advantages, discovered something terrifying. The humans were very, very good at basic infantry combat. They moved in coordinated units. They covered each other. They used every piece of terrain as cover. And they never ever stopped coming. One crash unit tried to fall back to their landing zone. They were intercepted by a group of local hunters and National Guard soldiers who'd been waiting in ambush. The humans used hunting rifles, shotguns, and whatever else they could find. They fought with a ferocity that seemed insane. "Why won't they run?" a Kresh soldier asked. He was wounded, his armor cracked, his weapon empty. Around him, his unit was being overrun. "Because we're defending our home," a human soldier answered in badly pronounced Kresh. The man was old, maybe 60, with gray hair and scars from some previous war. And we don't run from our homes. By dawn of day 3, the Kresh had lost half their ground forces. The survivors were scattered, isolated, and running out of supplies. Thexkor faced a choice he'd never thought he'd have to make. Recall all ground forces, he ordered. Immediate evacuation. Warlord, do it. Pull everyone back to the landing zones. We're leaving. The Kresh retreat was chaotic. Units fell back under heavy fire, trying to reach their dropships. The humans pursued aggressively, not willing to let the enemy escape easily. More Kresh died in the retreat than had died in the entire assault. But Thexkor wasn't done. As the last dropship lifted off, he gave his final order. Target the Velrani crash site. All ships, fire orbital bombardment. The Kresh warships turned their weapons toward Clearwater. If Thexkor couldn't have his escaped slaves, then no one would. He'd destroy the entire area and everyone in it, human and Velrani alike. Energy signatures detected, a human radar operator shouted. The Kresh ships are charging weapons. How long? General Okonkwo demanded. 30 seconds to firing. Once they shoot, we have maybe 10 seconds before impact. There was no time to evacuate. No time for anything except one last desperate move. Okonkwo picked up her red phone, the one connected directly to every military command center on Earth. Execute Hail Mary. All units, fire everything. Around the world, missile silos opened. Naval ships launched their payloads. Strategic bombers released their weapons. It wasn't nuclear. The human governments had promised not to use nuclear weapons unless absolutely necessary, but it was everything else. Hundreds of ballistic missiles streaked toward space. They were modified with Velrani guidance systems, making them far more accurate than normal. They were tipped with kinetic penetrators, solid metal slugs designed to punch through shields by sheer force. The Kresh fleet detected the launches and immediately shifted to defensive positions. Their shields could handle some impacts, maybe most impacts, but not all of them. Evasive maneuvers, Thexkor ordered. Return fire. Too late. The first missiles hit, then more and more. The Kresh shields glowed brighter and brighter, trying to disperse the kinetic energy. Some missiles were stopped. Others got through. One penetrator hit Thexkor's flagship just below the bridge. The ship shuddered. Systems failed. The bombardment order was cancelled as the crew fought to keep the ship functioning. 2 other Kresh warships took heavy damage. One lost all power and began drifting. Another's shields collapsed entirely, leaving it vulnerable. Warlord, an officer shouted. We must withdraw. If we stay, they'll destroy us. Thexkor stared at the planet below. He'd come here expecting an easy victory. Instead, he'd lost half his ground forces, damaged half his fleet, and been humiliated by primitives who shouldn't have been able to fight at all. This isn't over, he said. We'll return with a full armada. 50 ships. 100,000 soldiers. We'll scour this planet clean. Warlord, look at the intelligence reports. This planet has 8 billion inhabitants, hundreds of nations, nuclear weapons by the thousands. They went from ground warfare to space warfare in 3 days. If we give them time to prepare, if we give them access to our technology. The officer didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Then we'll bring enough force that it won't matter, but we will return. I swear it. The Kresh fleet began jumping to faster-than-light speed. One by one, the warships vanished, leaving Earth's orbit empty. On the ground, people watched the sky. When it became clear the Kresh were really leaving, a cheer went up. It started in Clearwater and spread across the world. Humans hugged each other. They hugged Velrani. Some laughed. Some cried. Sheriff Chen sat on a pile of rubble that used to be her office. Captain Webb found her there, staring at the smoking ruins of her town. We won, she said quietly. We survived, Webb corrected. They'll be back. I know. But for today we won. The cost of victory was written across the landscape. 3,800 humans dead, 6,000 wounded. Clearwater was mostly rubble. The surrounding mountains were scarred with craters and burned forests. Medical tents overflowed with casualties, both human and the Velrani, who'd been caught in the fighting, despite everyone's efforts to protect them. But all 3,000 Velrani refugees had survived. Not one had been captured or killed. That was what mattered. Historian Kelvara walked through the ruins with tears streaming down her face, her skin cycling through every color in her species' emotional spectrum. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, finding her. "We won, you're safe." "I know," Kelvara said. "That's why I'm crying. Your people died for us. Thousands of them. People who had never met a Velrani before 5 days ago. They died protecting strangers." She looked at Emma. "How do we ever repay that?" Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "You could start by helping us get ready for when those jerks come back. We're going to need bigger guns." Kelvara laughed through her tears. Yes, we can do that. We'll give you everything. Our technology, our knowledge, everything we have. And maybe." She looked around at the ruins. "Maybe together we can build something neither of our species could build alone." "Like what?" "A future," Kelvara said. "One where people don't have to run from bullies anymore. Where refugees find not just shelter but allies willing to stand and fight beside them." That night, despite exhaustion, despite losses, despite everything, there was a gathering. Humans and Velrani together, sharing food and stories. Someone brought out a guitar. Someone else sang. The Velrani joined in with their wind chime voices. It wasn't a victory celebration. It was too soon for that, with so many dead and wounded. But it was something. A moment of peace. A reminder of why they'd fought. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The wounded to heal, the dead to bury, the town to rebuild. And somewhere out there, the Kresh were planning their return. But tonight, under the Montana stars, humans and aliens sat together as friends, as allies, as people who'd stood together against the darkness and refused to break. And that, more than any weapon, more than any technology, gave them hope for what came next. 1 week after the battle, the world began to change in ways no one could have imagined. The memorial service was held in what used to be Clearwater's Central Park. Now it was a field of temporary markers, wooden crosses, stars of David, crescents, and Velrani memory stones that glowed softly in the evening light. Nearly 4,000 names, soldiers and civilians, young and old. People from 30 different countries who'd come to defend strangers. Sheriff Sarah Chen's name was among them. She died on the second day, using her body to shield 3 Velrani children from falling debris. Her deputy found her still holding them, all 4 alive because she'd refused to let go. President Alvarez spoke at the service. She stood before a crowd of thousands, humans and Velrani together, and tried to find words adequate for what had happened. "We are changed," she said simply. "A week ago, we thought we were alone in the universe. Now we know we're not. A week ago, we'd never met the Velrani. Now we've bled together, fought together, and mourned together. These people we honor today died protecting others. That's all that needs to be said. They died doing what humans do best, standing between the helpless and those who would harm them." Kelvara spoke next, her words translated by chorus for the humans present. "In all my years of studying civilizations, I never believed I would see one like yours. You are young, impulsive, sometimes foolish, but you have something that older, wiser species have lost. You have the courage to care about strangers. You have the strength to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. The Velrani will never forget this. We will never forget you." After the service, the real work began. The United Nations established the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. Their first order of business was helping the Velrani integrate into Earth society. It wasn't easy. Different biology, different culture, different needs. But humans had centuries of experience with immigration and refugees. They adapted. Velrani families were housed in temporary shelters at first, then gradually moved into permanent homes. Some stayed in Montana, feeling a connection to the place where they'd crashed. Others spread out across the world. They brought skills Earth desperately needed: advanced medicine, engineering, science. In return, they learned about humanity, about Earth's diverse cultures and histories. Children adapted fastest, as always. Within weeks, Velrani kids were attending Earth schools, playing Earth games and teaching human kids about the stars. Language barriers faded quickly. Chorus helped, but more important was the simple desire to communicate, to be friends. The technology exchange happened faster than anyone expected. The Velrani didn't just share information, they actively taught. Velrani engineers worked with human scientists explaining principles that would have taken Earth decades to discover alone. Emma Reeves and Sil Tran became the face of this cooperation. They appeared on news programs, explaining their work in simple terms. They'd become close friends during the crisis, and their partnership became a model for human Velrani collaboration. "It's not about them giving us technology," Emma explained in one interview. "It's about learning together. We think differently than they do. Sometimes our primitive solutions to problems work better than their advanced ones. Sometimes the opposite is true. Together we're better than either species alone." The first major project was medical. Velrani doctors had techniques for treating injuries and diseases that seemed miraculous to human medicine. But human biology was different enough that the treatments needed modification. Human doctors and Velrani healers worked together, combining knowledge from both species. Dr. Rachel Foster, a surgeon from Seattle, stood in an operating room with a Velrani healer named Morthan. They were performing surgery on a human soldier wounded in the battle, a procedure that would have been impossible a month ago. "Your species heals so slowly," Morthan observed, his skin showing concern. "But your bodies are remarkably resilient. You can survive injuries that would kill most species." "Evolution on a death world," Rachel replied, carefully following Morthan's instructions. "We had to be tough to survive. Can you pass me the regeneration catalyst? It is fascinating how you adapt. Your medicine is so different from ours, yet the goal is the same: healing, helping." The surgery was successful. The soldier, who would have lost his leg with human medicine alone, kept it. News of the success spread quickly. Other hospitals wanted Velrani medical assistance. More Velrani healers volunteered to teach. But the most important work was happening in orbit. 6 months after the battle, construction began on humanity's first faster-than-light ship. It was built in space, assembled by astronauts and Velrani engineers working together. They called it Remember Clearwater. The ship combined human and Velrani technology in ways neither species had attempted before. Velrani FTL drives and shields, yes, but also human weapon systems, human computer networks, human design philosophy. Where Velrani ships were beautiful and elegant, human ships were practical and tough. Remember Clearwater was both. Captain Marcus Webb, promoted to lead the new Space Defense Corps, oversaw construction from a temporary station in orbit. He floated in zero gravity, watching welding sparks dance in the darkness as another hull section was attached. "It's beautiful," Sil Tran said, floating beside him. "It's a warship," Webb replied. "Nothing beautiful about that. It represents hope, cooperation, two species working together to defend themselves. That is beautiful." Webb had to admit he had a point. Around them, human and Velrani workers moved together seamlessly. They'd learned to communicate despite language differences. They'd learned to trust each other. Some had become friends. "How long until she's ready?" Webb asked. "Another 6 months for the main construction, then testing." "But Webb, you know they're coming back, don't you?" "The creche, ThexCorp promised. I know. That's why we're building 20 more ships like this one, and why we're not just sitting around waiting." Earth's military had transformed. Every nation contributed to the common defense now. The United Nations Security Council had actual authority for the first time in its history. Armies trained together. Technology was shared freely. Old rivalries seemed petty when facing an external threat. But they needed more than weapons. They needed intelligence. They needed to know what was coming. That's where Tokmar came in. The Velrani teacher had encyclopedic knowledge of creche society, tactics, and psychology. He worked with human military analysts, building a complete picture of the enemy. "The creche Dominion controls 40 star systems," Tokmar explained to a room full of generals. "But their empire is not as strong as it appears. They rule through fear and overwhelming force. Most subject species hate them but are too afraid to rebel." "What about allies?" General Okonkwo asked. "Do they have any?" "No. The creche take what they want and trust no one. This is their weakness. They cannot imagine why you would help us. They cannot understand cooperation between species. Good, we'll use that, but understanding the enemy wasn't enough. Earth needed allies, too. The Velrani sent out messages to other refugee groups hiding throughout the galaxy. Some were too afraid to respond. Others were interested but cautious. A few decided to take the chance. 14 months after the battle, the first refugee ship arrived. It wasn't Velrani. It was Mikran, a species that looked like upright otters with golden fur and enormous eyes. Their ship was damaged, their people desperate. The approaching vessel broadcast a simple message. Earth helps refugees. True? President Alvarez herself responded. Yes, come to Earth, we protect you. The Mikran ship landed in Australia. 2,000 more refugees. More mouths to feed, more people to house. But also more knowledge, more perspective, more allies. The Mikran were traders and diplomats. They knew the galaxy's politics and economics. They brought information about other species, other worlds. More ships came. Slowly at first, then faster. The Helkani, a crystalline species fleeing religious persecution. The Earthen, who looked like bears but were gentle herbivores. The Kesik, insect-like beings with incredible technical skills. Each group brought their own gifts, their own knowledge. Earth became a haven. A legend spread among refugee communities. There was a world called Earth where a primitive species had fought the Kresh and won. Where refugees were welcomed and protected. Where you could be safe. Not everyone was happy about this. Some humans worried about resources, about change, about the aliens changing human culture. There were protests. There were problems. Integration wasn't always smooth, but most people remembered Clearwater. They remembered humans and Velrani fighting together. They remembered that the alternative to helping refugees was abandoning them to people like the Kresh. And most humans, when faced with that choice, chose to help. Kelevara watched all of this with amazement. She'd lived 70 years and studied countless civilizations. She'd never seen anything like humanity. You are chaos, she told Emma one day. They were having coffee, something the Velrani had quickly developed a taste for. Your species barely agrees on anything. You fight among yourselves constantly. You have hundreds of languages, thousands of cultures. By any logical standard, you should be weak. But, Emma prompted, but when threatened, you unite instantly. When faced with injustice, you fight. When someone needs help, you help them, even if it costs you. Your chaos is your strength. You're unpredictable, adaptable, creative. The galaxy has never seen anything like humanity. Is that good or bad? Both. You terrify me and inspire me in equal measure. Emma laughed. Yeah, we get that a lot. The intelligence reports came 15 months after the battle. The Kresh were mobilizing. Not 6 ships this time, a fleet. At least 30 warships, maybe more, carrying not 2,000 soldiers, but 20,000. They were coming to finish what Thexcor had started. The news spread quickly. Some people panicked. Others prepared. Earth's defenses had improved dramatically, but everyone knew this would be different. The Kresh would be ready this time. They wouldn't underestimate humanity again. Webb stood on the bridge of Remember Clearwater, now fully operational. Around him, his crew worked at their stations. Humans and Velrani and Mikran and others all working together. How long, he asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4, his tactical officer replied. She was Velrani, one of the few who had learned military skills in the past year. Captain, we're not ready. We have 20 ships. They'll have 3 times that many. Then we'd better be smart about it. General Okonkwo had a plan. It was risky. It was probably crazy, but crazy seemed to work for humanity. We don't fight them in space, she explained to Earth's military leaders. Not at first. We let them come to Earth. Let them think they're winning. Then we hit them with everything we've got. Ships, ground forces, cyber warfare, everything. We make it hurt so badly they think twice about ever coming back. And if it doesn't work? Someone asked. Then we lose. But we'll lose fighting and the Kresh will know they've been in a war. The message went out to all of Earth's allies. The Velrani, the Mikran, the others. Everyone was asked the same question. Will you stand with us? Every single one said yes. Ships from 4 different species gathered in Earth's orbit. Not just warships. Civilian vessels, too, converted to carry supplies and reinforcements. It wasn't a proper fleet by galactic standards. It was a desperate alliance of refugees and primitives. But it was what they had. On the ground, preparations continued. Clearwater had been rebuilt stronger than before, more defensive positions, better weapons. The lessons learned in the first battle had been studied and applied. Other locations around Earth were similarly fortified. Refugee camps became training centers. Velrani, who'd never held weapons, learned to fight alongside humans. Not because they wanted to be warriors, but because they refused to hide while others fought for them. Emma and Siltran completed their final project the day before the crash arrived. It was a weapon, but not a traditional one. It was a virus more sophisticated than the one they'd created before. This one wouldn't just disable crash systems. It would turn them against each other. Will it work? Webb asked. Maybe, Emma said. We've only been able to test it on equipment from the first battle. If the Kresh change their systems, then we adapt, like we always do. The Kresh fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel right on schedule. 38 warships. Sensors detected over 20,000 soldiers. Warlord Thexkor himself commanded the fleet, determined to erase his previous humiliation. He broadcast his message immediately. Primitives of Earth, last time I offered mercy, no more. Surrender all refugees, all alien technology, and submit to Kresh authority, or die. President Alvarez's response was broadcast across every frequency, in every language for everyone to hear. Warlord Thexkor, this is President Maria Alvarez speaking for Earth and our allies. We've built you a welcome. When you look down at our planet, you see cities, farms, and forests. We see home. Every inch of it worth fighting for. Every person worth defending. You want to take that from us. You want to take our friends, our allies, our freedom. Here's our answer. She paused, then continued. We are Earth. We offer sanctuary to those who flee tyranny. We stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. We are humans, Velrani, Mikron, Helkani, and free people everywhere. And we do not surrender. Come and try to take what's ours. We'll be waiting. The transmission ended. For a moment, there was silence. Then across Earth, in orbit, in refugee camps and military bases, a cheer went up. It was defiant. It was probably foolish, but it was human. Thexkor stared at his screens in disbelief. He'd brought 10 times the force. He'd prepared for everything. And still they defied him. So be it, he said. Launch all forces. I want that planet reduced to ash. The battle for Earth had begun, but this time Earth was ready. This time they had allies. This time they had hope. Captain Webb stood on his bridge watching the Kresh fleet approach. Next to him, Siltran monitored the computer systems. Behind them, a crew of 5 species worked together seamlessly. Are you afraid? Siltran asked. Webb smiled, terrified. But they're about to learn the most important rule of the galaxy. What's that? Never threaten someone's home, especially if that someone is human. The Remember Clearwater and its sister ships moved to intercept. On Earth below, defensive positions armed and waited. In orbit, satellites and stations prepared to fight. Across the system, allies took their positions. The message was clear. The battle would be hard. Victory wasn't guaranteed. Many would die. But Earth would not surrender. Not now, not ever. And somewhere in the galaxy, on planets and ships and stations scattered across the stars, other refugees heard about Earth. They heard about a world that stood against tyranny. They heard about humans who fought for strangers. They heard about a place where you could be safe, where you could be free, where people would stand beside you against the darkness. The message spread, carrying hope to those who had forgotten what hope felt like. Earth had become more than a planet. It had become an idea, a promise, a declaration that some things were worth fighting for no matter the cost. And that message, more than any weapon, would change the galaxy forever. The battle raged on, but the outcome, whatever it might be, had already sent ripples across the stars. Humanity had stood up. They had said no to tyranny. They had protected the vulnerable. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to be human, and the universe would never be the same.